Considering a transition to private pay, Thrizer can help you transform out of network therapy to look and feel like an in network experience for your clients. Your clients just pay co-insurance for sessions instead of waiting weeks for reimbursement. Thrizer covers the rest of your fees so you get paid in full upfront. Check out our special link, join.thrizer.com/modern therapist, and use the code modern therapists to activate $2,500 in free payments with Thrizer.
Is your mental health practice buried in the bottom of Google search results? There's a way out. Simplified SEO Consulting offers a roadmap to search engine success. As mental health professionals, they know how to help therapists attract ideal clients and build a thriving practice. Go to simplifiedseoconsulting.com/modern therapist to learn more and unlock your SEO potential this summer.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt Widhelm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that we do in our practices, the types of clients that we see, things that go on dealing with mental health in the world. And we have decided to take on talking about working with clients on loneliness. And I think that some of this will also apply to our listeners here as well, who are therapists themselves, because this is a universal feeling and we want to help people to deal with this. But I think in shaping this just a little bit, we're going to talk about when we are working with clients, some of the reasons that people might be talking about loneliness in the ways that they show up in our office, some of the things that we do that are helpful, some of them that we do that are not helpful. Sometimes just the order that we do them in might be not helpful. And so I will just kind of start this out with, I know that a lot of the stuff that I read because of the clients that I'm in talk about like the male loneliness epidemic. And the more that I read into this, there's just a loneliness epidemic in general. And I think it shows up differently for males and females, or just in general. I don't want to just make this kind of a binary sort of approach here, but I think that that will help us to be able to kind of separate out some of the specific interventions that we get to towards the end of the episode here. But in general, well, we might drift one way or another. We do want to acknowledge that loneliness is going to show up differently for different people. But in our awkward transitions at the beginning of most episodes, I usually ask Katie some sort of question at the beginning and say, how do you think that most therapists are responding when clients are saying, I'm really lonely?
I don't know necessarily, but my suspicion is one of two ways. Let me solve it. Let's get you out there. You're feeling lonely. Get some friends, get some social support. I could see the other thing also being true, where let's just sit with this loneliness and feel the loneliness, and there's never any practical solutions. It's just a whole bunch of processing and understanding the loneliness. I'm not thinking that either of those are 100% effective. I think both have a place, but I worry that those of us, and I'm including myself in this, who are problem solvers may blow past the important clinical, kind of emotional work around loneliness, and folks who are the more non-directive therapists will get mired down in loneliness and the root of loneliness and all the past trauma and all of the horrible things that mean that you're lonely today.
I think most clients who have talked with me about working with other therapists and some of the stuff that I read online as far as people's experience with therapy is that a lot of the advice giving or the behavioral activation that is being given to people in this situation is go and find groups, go volunteer, go be around other people, to just kind of not be holed up in your living quarters, to just go be around other people. Like, there's this really practical advice that is trying to address the fact that loneliness equals isolation. But that's not necessarily what those two terms mean. And I mean, I've experienced plenty of times in my life where I'm surrounded by people and still don't feel a connection with anybody and feel very lonely even being around others. So I think one of our first mistakes is conflating the terms isolated versus lonely.
I agree. And I think the thing that you're talking about as well with get out, do stuff, find social support, that sounds like treating depression.
Yes. And so you're leading into one of the other things that can often be attributed to here is that I will say from the very beginning, loneliness is a normal feeling. And it is something that depending on what your background is, if you're a very extroverted person, you might feel lonely after a rainy afternoon where you're not allowed to like go out and be around other people. Loneliness can be a temporary feeling. I think a lot more of where we're focusing this episode on is kind of a chronic feeling of loneliness, but it is a normal human feeling that we as professionals need to be careful that we're not looking at this as just kind of this one directional, like loneliness is caused by something like major depressive episode or something like that. Both of those can be there, but they're not necessarily one leads to the other, because loneliness can sometimes lead to major depressive episodes and it can be bidirectional. So good call there.
Yeah. I as you were talking, I was thinking about this is what the joy is of being more of an existentialist therapist. I just believe all of us are inherently alone. And so I think I'm more comfortable sitting with loneliness than some folks who see it as, negative. This is a bad symptom. We've got to fix it. And not that this is a natural human emotion and a way of being at times that we just need to kind of explore and get a little more comfortable with.
And the wonderful philosophical teachings that come from the Big Lebowski is that the way that they talk about nihilism and about like the nihilists say that there is nothing to fear really is a different interpretation than there's nothing to fear.
Or I fear nothing.
Join us every week for references to 30-year-old movies. But in the meantime, a lot of the research I have found that I really like comes from Anton Call, and a couple of articles that we'll put in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com gets into a lot of kind of the history around research around loneliness. That some of the really big stuff started coming out in the early 80s on this stuff. It does speak to how the impact of COVID is affecting a lot of people further, and just kind of also the loss of things like the third place in society, where there used to be home and work and then the bar that people would go to after work, or the public square kinds of things that was just kind of the happenstance place where you'd meet people and you'd hang out. And with the internet being a bigger part of society where you don't have to have those reasons to go out and hang out with people, there's just been kind of this disappearance of like unplanned places where you can just go and hang out and meet people. And now, like, if you show up someplace and you just start talking to strangers, you're just weird. But
or you're on social media.
Right.
And I'd be interested to see if there are folks who actually get that feeling of the third place from, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Snapchat, all the social media stuff versus the actual in-person interactions. I think some people have different social needs, but I would be interested. So I know that's a side note, so I'll let you get back to it.
So one of the meta-analyses that comes up in the research is by Massey Chen Hockley and Cacioppo. And this is from 2011 that looks at, there seems to be 4 broad categories of interventions for clinicians to use when it comes to dealing with loneliness. One of them is providing opportunities for social interaction, but that is not the one that seems to be the most effective as a first level strategy. And what instead needs to be looked at is, while there's a goal of enhancing social support, even that comes after evaluating for, do you have social skills in the first place? And whether or not you do, the most effective and probably first step that we need to look at in working with clients is cognitive restructuring as it pertains to one's own relationship with isolation, with loneliness, why they feel that they're there in the first place. And I think that this gets into some of the core reasons why people might be showing up in places around a bunch of other people and still feeling very isolated, whether these be self-limiting beliefs of nobody's going to like me anyway, so why bother, whether it's going to be people aren't going to relate to me. If it is something that's I don't know how to relate to others, then that can more specifically address some of the social skills aspects. But I've found it really fascinating just to be able to start talking with my own clients as far as how do you feel about your own loneliness in the first place? How did we get here? And I think that some of this can lead back to some very core beliefs or even some very psychodynamic beliefs that have their roots in childhood.
If you've been considering switching to private pay and are unsure how to attract and retain clients, Thrizer can be your best resource. How? Thrizer actually helps you transform out-of-network therapy to look and feel like an in-network experience for clients with out-of-network benefits.
First, Thrizer can help clients instantly verify their out-of-network benefits, providing them complete transparency on the cost of therapy ahead of their first session. Then, just by charging your clients via Thrizer's payment platform, you can automatically submit claims for them, offload all the insurance stress onto Thrizer, and even let your clients just pay their coinsurance for sessions, similar to in-network copays, to help them afford therapy upfront and skip the long reimbursement wait. Thrizer covers the rest of your fees, so you get paid in full upfront and waits for reimbursement on your client's behalf.
They also have a super bill uploads feature, which is completely free for therapists. If you'd like to instead offer your clients a resource to manage their own super bills, they manage all claims end to end, so you or your clients don't need to deal with any of the insurance stress. Visit join.thrizer.com/modern therapist to get started and use our promo code modern therapists to start your free trial and receive waived fees for your first $2,500 in payments. I was also thinking about a lot of the attachment trauma and childhood trauma where there's also the belief of or maybe not belief, but the feeling that I don't like my own company. I can't handle being by myself, because I think there's also an importance to distinguish loneliness from solitude. And so I think folks who are able to be alone or able to be in spaces where they're not connecting to folks and feel okay, that's not loneliness, that's solitude. That's, or maybe not when you're around people, but that's a different feeling and not what we're talking about here. And I've definitely had clients where they're like, I was comfortable being with myself, with keeping myself company today. And so I think really understanding why someone is lonely or what's contributing to the feelings of loneliness, I think are so important. So we start with that. Is that what you're saying? It's starting with like, what do you feel is leading you to this feeling of loneliness?
And some people might have the insight into it or not. And I think that this is where it starts to tease out how loneliness ends up shifting based on whether it be kind of male loneliness or whether it be anybody else's loneliness. I'm seeing more and more research emerging around male loneliness kinds of things. And maybe it's just because this is the people in my practice. But it seems to be that a lot of the ways that men in particular are socialized growing up to needing to be providers to their families sooner, being held to not being able to express emotions in ways that are the ways that we teach female presenting members of our society that can be more socially emotional in their relationships. I mean, if you think of any of your guy friends around their guy friends, you're going to see them engaging in different relationships than some of the gal friends who might be out with their friends, or even just the ways that you can picture them talking to each other on the phone. males in particular tend to not be expressive in labeling their emotions, and to expect them to do that in a way that is typically assigned to some of the female members of our society ends up being something where it further becomes invalidating to, well, I've tried to express this. The people who, I told I'm sad or I'm lonely just didn't know how to respond to a guy saying this. And they jumped into problem solving things. But if you picture, guys in how they relate with their buddies, a lot of it is just kind of non-linear. It's not like a feelings based thing. It's more of feeling understood just in ways of expressing emotion, such as being at a sporting event where you're able to jump and share into the moment when your favorite team scores the big score. Like, there's kind of an in the moment emotionality that helps to feel connected in those situations that isn't expressed in a way that is, hey, I'm feeling like I really enjoy being around you, that just gets kind of diminished or brushed over or passed off as being kind of an uncomfortable vulnerability.
With the male clients that I see, I do hear that quite a bit, that there's not a space for them to really talk about their more inner world, whether it's a partner, female or otherwise, that doesn't expect them to, or feels impatient to listen to the man talking about their inner world, their worries, their pains, their concerns, their needs. Or if it's weaponized in a way where it's used against them, or those types of things. When I try to talk about supportive male friends, they talk exactly like you do about that this is something where, guys don't do that. And there's different pathways to it. And so I feel like there's certainly a male loneliness that makes a lot of sense. I think there's the loneliness of, kind of folks who are very, like the attachment trauma folks who they don't have value unless they're in a relationship. They feel scared of being alone without a relationship. I remember some of my loneliest times were being in groups of people celebrating things that I was never going to be able to celebrate, or even in leadership. I know before we hit record, you were talking about kind of the group practice owner experience. I certainly, as a director, I felt very isolated, very alone, that no one understood my experience and all of that. And there wasn't anybody to talk to. And so I think there's kind of practical contributing factors. I think there's societal contributing factors. I think there's also kind of emotional trauma history, that kind of contributing factors. Where do we go from there? When we've kind of sat with that, we've talked through it, we've worked it, we've processed it, we've grieved it, whatever it is, like, what are then the next steps that seem more impactful?
So getting to the place of that understanding of the relationship with loneliness. So when you're talking about the guys don't do that kind of responses from clients, the opportunity is right there to be like, what is it that you want in those moments? Like, when you're there with your buddies, you're watching football, you're playing poker, you're doing work on a car, or you're walking on the beach. I don't know, whatever it is that you guys do with each other. It's like, when you're there and you're wanting to express something, it's not what are the results that you want, but it's what do you internally want in that moment. And it's oftentimes it comes down to, I want to feel understood. I want somebody to empathize with what I'm going through, maybe offer some advice at the end, but to really, I want to be seen for where I'm at in my particular moment. And there's a tremendous amount of vulnerability that it takes to be able to go to even lifelong friends and be like, I really just want you to sit and hear me and validate what I'm going through. Guys don't get taught to do that. I think we're doing a little bit more towards that in society, but and I think that this is also something where what I hear from guys when they do express this to their dating partners, or they do express this to some of the female friends in their lives, is that's where they are looking for, I want to be validated as a person. I want to be able to look at the things that I'm doing and experiencing as being real. But oftentimes, even that gets shoved away by it being not in the way that guys typically express these feelings. And that's why those in the moments, sports team scores, we're able to give high fives and chest bump and do manly grunting kinds of things that is just like, okay, all of the pretenses in those moments go down so we can be kind of barbaric in how we express feelings. But what it is I'm in a moment with you at the same time and we're experiencing something together. But outside of, seasonal sports events or something like that, it's really, really hard to get that, especially when we're not around other people that we believe to have the same experiences as us.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reflecting on, there's generational differences with that, there's cultural differences with that. So I think we're speaking broadly here, everyone. We're not trying to disclude anybody. But I think that there is this element of sorting out how do we get our needs met with what is available to us and how do we identify what that is. And I think the feeling of being heard and understood and seen, I think really is a good antidote to loneliness. It's not always available, and so we have to be aware of that, but I think it is a really powerful thing to share with other people, and that requires vulnerability, that requires a willingness to show yourself, to be available, to be seen and heard and joined together with.
Feeling like your ideal clients just can't find you online? There's a better way with Simplified SEO Consulting. They're a team of mental health marketing specialists who understand the unique challenges therapists face in the digital world. Forget wasting time on confusing SEO tactics that leave you feeling frustrated and out of the loop.
Simplified SEO Consulting offers a range of proven solutions to fit your practice needs, from DIY courses that empower you to take control, to done with you coaching that provides expert guidance at every step, to their individualized done for you SEO plans that let you focus on your clients while they handle the details. Plus, they have an innovative content network program that has set practices across the country apart from the rest. When you're ready to start showing up in front of your ideal clients online, the expert team at Simplified SEO Consulting is ready for you.
Visit simplifiedseoconsulting.com/modern therapist to schedule your free consultation and find the perfect SEO plan to unlock the full potential of your practice. Don't forget to mention Modern Therapist Survival Guide podcast for $100 off your done-for-you SEO onboarding, or use code Modern Therapist for 20% off a DIY SEO course this summer. When we talk about the pressures that anybody faces by needing to go and be at work and then come home and be responsible for house chores, kids, child rearing sorts of things that all the stuff that misses the opportunities and the time to be able to go and connect with others, adds a further isolation aspect to this that, in conjunction with the loneliness, is now there's no time or there's no money to go out and do things because it's very expensive to go to big ticket events all of the time, or it takes a lot of needing to plan and coordinate with other people who have incredibly busy schedules in order to go and get these needs met in a way that historically has been there. And so being able to say like, hey, I'm really busy and I just want to hang out and be around people who are kind of like me, in a way that I know that they have a shared relationship or shared relationship with their life, not even just being able to have to express that, but just like I'm around other people like me. And I think that jumping to, just sending our clients out to, oh, you really like dogs, you should go volunteer at an animal shelter where other people who like dogs are also there, kind of misses that intermediate factor that is what the relationship is, just beyond like, hey, I guess I like dogs, but like, there's people who really like dogs that have a different relationship with dogs than I do. So
Sure.
it kind of bypasses that like first part of like, what is it that I'm trying to connect with, beyond just like, here's a singular interest that I can find on meetup or something like that.
Well, I think there's that element of being a cookie cutter response to a much more complex problem. I also feel like it doesn't adequately address the trust issues, the self-confidence issues. I mean, I think that there's another element to this, which is maybe going to that dog shelter is exactly right, but the person doesn't have the capacity to do it. And so I've, with some of the clients I've worked with, I've talked about what's motivating, how do you show up, can you test it out, those types of things. And even certain levels of desensitization, if it's something they've chosen but they feel like, well, nobody's going to like me, or I'm going to be rejected, there's the it's kind of it's in some ways better to be lonely than actively dismissed or rejected.
No, I'm glad that you're bringing up rejection, because one of the things that does show up in the literature over and over again is loneliness is a byproduct of social rejection sensitivity, or rejection sensitivity. That if I'm going to go out and make an attempt and fail at it, that this is a protective mechanism for not going out and reinforcing my own beliefs about myself, in addition to having the rejection happen. So that is another very rich area to explore with clients, is just the belief in their ability to go out and take chances and rebound from them as a interpersonal factor that goes beyond just kind of like, here's how you go out and meet people. It's more of that psychological factor of being able to respond and be able to dust themselves off and try again, or be able to even reframe like, well, what parts of going out were successful in being able to connect with others.
It can be a very painful process, I think, especially for folks who have been traditionally marginalized, or have been bullied, or who have been rejected consistently, or who are more socially awkward. And I think we want to honor that it's not something that's easily solved. And so the pre-work, or maybe the work, if we want to talk about that, is really, I think, in a lot of ways more important. The relationship to loneliness, relationship to self, understanding yourself in relation to others, your needs, your attachment style, maybe even. Like there's a lot of things that I think can be very important. And as we're talking about, I just feel like the topic of loneliness is very, very broad. So with not a ton of time left, and we want to get more into some additional solutions, I just want to acknowledge that there's so many different types of loneliness, and all of those things, that I think that this is really a very important type of work. And it's not, like step 1, step 2, step 3. I feel like some of it is just how people are in the world, and helping them to get more comfortable in their own skin so they can be in the world.
One of the things that I'm noticing is we're both talking through this episode and trying to take this very broad topic and apply it to a lot of people, is we're both kind of being like, okay, here's where this particular aspect is coming up, and we're trying to be respectful of all genders, presentations, social abilities, any of this kind of stuff. Is that there's also just even the possibility that people are listening to this podcast and going to be let down by this because it doesn't speak to the specific needs and how they relate to their own loneliness.
Exactly.
And that's why it's such a big piece of being able to start there in our work with clients is, all right, how does loneliness mean to you? Like, I know that that's a very odd way to ask that question. But
I don't know that I will ask it that way, Curt, but go for it.
But there's even just kind of like all right, let's get to your specific kind of loneliness. Let's get to what it is that your expectations are, and how those can be specifically met and addressed. So that way it becomes very personalized as far as how the treatment and the social suggestions that we might make to go and increase the positives, or the lower the risks of the rejection. So while well-intentioned, when we do tell people, hey, go out to the animal shelter because you're less likely to be rejected by people who also love animals. all right, we're trying to get to a place where it's like, okay, we're trying to minimize some of the rejection possibilities there. But if you're going for the wrong intentions, I've had plenty of clients go and volunteer someplace, but their intentions are, I want to go there and I want to date people who are there. Okay, not why other people are there. Like, that's moving around why you're facing some of the possible rejections or the possible ways of like not getting your emotional needs met because you haven't come to being able to look at why it is that you're seeking this out in the first place.
Another point that's worth saying, because we've talked about kind of starting with the relationship to loneliness and the contributing factors, working on those, and then moving into increasing social support, whether it's with affinity groups, people with shared lived experience, kind of structured ways to get to know people better, or even desensitization to it, right? So like we've made it sound a little bit linear, and I think that it's really iterative. At least in my experience, where we start the conversation about loneliness and what it means to them and what their relationship is, to use your words, with loneliness, and how they view themselves and their relationship to self and others. And then it starts with the experiments and continuing that conversation as you get more data, when you get into more spaces with people who are more likely to connect with you and meet your needs. And so I think this isn't something where you have to like, I'm working on myself, and once I'm done working on myself, then I can go out and be with people. And then I won't be lonely anymore. It's like, no. Again, loneliness is an experience that we have no matter where we are in our lives. It happens. And this is always a work in progress. And we're continuing, life changes, the world changes, we change. And so we're going to continue to come back to these questions of who am I? How do I relate to the world, myself, others, my experience of loneliness?
We would love to hear your thoughts on this. You can share your thoughts on our social media. You can join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on this conversation.
And try to avoid loneliness, because we'll join you in this Facebook group. It's our square.
And we'll put links to a couple of the articles that we looked at in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. And until next time, I'm Curt Whithelm with Katie Vernoy.
Charge your full rate with confidence with Thrizer. Thrizer takes care of 100% of the insurance stress and helps your clients skip the long reimbursement wait, giving you a powerful tool to attract and retain out-of-network clients with ease. Check out our special link, join.thrizer.com/modern therapist, and use the code Modern Therapists to activate $2,500 in free payments with Thrizer.
Feeling stuck with SEO for your therapy practice? There's hope. Head to simplifiedseoconsulting.com/modern therapist and unlock your website's SEO potential with simplified SEO consulting. Use code Modern Therapist for a discount and mention the Modern Therapist Survival Guide podcast for a special offer on Done For You SEO this summer. Let's build your dream practice together.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.